very few exceptions, human beings want to be emotionally and physically close to each other. Life seems better shared. Nobody wants to be out alone on their own in an island, and yet no area of human endeavor seems more fraught with challenges and difficulties than our relationships with others. Relationships, like most things in life that are worth having, require some effort. And as we have seen the last few weeks, effort with God. We have a relationship with God. We need to have a healthy relationship with God first. We need to have a healthy relationship with friends. We need to have a healthy relationship with our spouse. Even good relationships take work. After all, our significant other, our close friends, and even our parents aren't perfect. And oddly enough, they may see us as imperfect as well. We have to learn how to accommodate and adopt what they are thinking. We have to adapt to their faults and their moods, and just as they must learn how to do the same thing with us. In other words, you're not so easy to get along with either. And so we got to work with each other and do that. Every person who comes into your life, I believe, is there for a reason. Every person who comes into your life is put there for a reason. I believe God has sent people into my life who have blessed me immensely. But I also think Satan has put people in my life to stumble me, to harm me, to get me off course. I fully believe that. And so there are several types of relationships that are liabilities, not assets. They harm us. They cause problems. They cause issues. And if you're going to develop healthy relationships, you first have to cut off the unhealthy ones. Have you noticed that some relationships that you have with people are a little more difficult? It takes a little more work, requires a little more effort. But then there are, what I want to talk about today, toxic relationships. Toxic relationships. These relationships have mutated themselves into something that has the potential, if not corrected, to be harmful to our very well-being. These relationships are not necessarily hopeless, but they require substantial and difficult work if they want to be changed into something healthy. So the paradox is that in order to have a reasonable chance to turn a toxic relationship into a healthy relationship, we have to be prepared to leave that relationship. So what exactly is a toxic relationship, and how do you know if you're in one? Here's a definition I found of a toxic relationship. It is characterized by behaviors on the part of the toxic person that are emotionally, physically, or spiritually damaging to someone. It's characterized by behaviors on the part of the toxic person that are emotionally, physically, or spiritually damaging to someone. We'll leave that definition up if you're writing that down to see that. But toxic can be defined as anything containing poisonous material that's capable of causing you to have sickness or even death. For example, you probably have some form or shape of bleach in your home. You don't let the kids play with the bleach. Why? It's toxic. If they swallow it, they get it on their skins, they get it on their skin and their eyes, it's toxic. Toxic people tend to create, this is no-brainer, toxic relationships, which can have serious consequences for our lives. And so we need to set some boundaries against harmful relationships in order to save our emotional energy for pursuing God. While a healthy relationship contributes to our self-esteem and emotional energy, a toxic relationship damages your self-esteem. It drains your energy. Being around someone like that absolutely drains you. A healthy relationship involves mutual caring and respect and compassion and interest in our friend or partner's welfare and growth and ability to share and control decision making. We're making decisions together. In other words, we have this desire to make each other happy. We want each other to be happy. A healthy relationship is a safe relationship, a relationship where we can be ourselves without fear, a place where we can feel comfortable and secure. But a toxic relationship is not a safe place. A toxic relationship is characterized by insecurity, self-centeredness, dominance, control. We risk our very being by staying in such a relationship. And so to say a toxic relationship is dysfunctional is an understatement. Now keep in mind, it takes two people to have a toxic relationship. Even though one of them may be toxic, it takes two to mix that. So what can we do? Short of leaving, that might help in a relationship like that. Well, if a person in your life is toxic to your mental, spiritual, physical health, often the wisest decision is to put some distance between you and them. God's greatest desire is to set us free. He said, I have come to set you free from your sin, from your shame, from your guilt, from your sorrow. And sometimes that means facing the person and saying, stop it. No more. I will not put up with this. And you walk away. You say, what's the biblical basis for that? Proverbs chapter 13, verse 20 says this. He who walks with wise men will be wise, but a companion of fools will be destroyed. He who walks with the wise, you're going to be wise. You got a friend who's a fool, you're going to be like them. You're going to be destroyed. It's going to destroy your life. 1 Corinthians 15:33 says, do not be deceived. Evil company corrupts good habits. Evil company corrupts good habits. I told you a few weeks ago that I had some relationships in high school that weren't very good relationships, and my mother gave me that verse. She showed me that verse in the Scripture. Evil company, those you hang with, can cause bad habits. They corrupt your habits. They corrupt you. So be careful who your friends are, we saw a few weeks ago. But God actually warns us of the many different types of toxic people that we might encounter in our daily lives. Some people we are to avoid in Scripture. We are to avoid the violent man, Proverbs 16. We are to avoid the wicked man, Proverbs 12. We are to avoid the gossip, Proverbs 16. We are to avoid the perverse, Proverbs 16. We are to avoid those who engage in deeds of darkness, Proverbs chapter 2. We are to avoid the thief. If you've got somebody who hangs around you who is a thief, get away from them, Proverbs chapter 1. We are to avoid the adulterers, Proverbs chapter 2. Furthermore, 2 Timothy chapter 3 tells us we should not be friends with lovers of self, lovers of money, the proud, the abusive, those disobedient to parents, the ungrateful, the heartless, the lovers of pleasure, and on and on and on. Why in the world, in that big list, does he say those who are disobedient to the parent? If you can't honor your parent, you'll never honor anybody else. If you don't have enough respect for the people who brought you into the world, why should you respect anybody else? That's why they're in that list. Now, how can I know that I'm in a toxic relationship? Well, here's one way to know. 9 times out of 10, there will be constant strife and division. Day and night, night and day. There will be constant strife and division in the relationship. Amos chapter 3, verse 3 asks this question. Can two walk together unless they are agreed? The answer is no. So a healthy relationship is one in which there is oneness of goals, purpose, values, and beliefs. God's Word says this. Where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are there, James 3:16. Where envy is and self-seeking, where they are, there's confusion. It causes confusion. The Greek word for confusion means unstable. The unstable. The Bible tells us that a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways, James chapter 1, verse 8. He can't make up his mind. He's unstable. Every single day you don't know where they're going to fall. The situation's out of order and therefore out of control. And God, we know this, is a God of order. Have you seen the creation? Have you seen the planet, the stars, the moon, the universe? God is a God of order. And so He's set up lines of authority. And when those lines are violated, the door is open for every evil thing to come rushing in. Strife and confusion sap your energy. They drain your creativity. They take your focus off of God and what He has for you. Now, every single relationship has a brief period that we could label toxic. Why? Human beings aren't perfect. We've got our issues. We try to deal with them. Sometimes we don't make good decisions. Most of us have never had any formal education on how to relate to others. We just do it. And most of the time where we learn to do it? From our parents. So if your parents, this is not psychology, but if your parents didn't have a good relationship, it's going to may cause some issues in how you have a relationship. Dysfunction is the norm in a toxic relationship, though. The toxic person engages in inappropriate controlling and manipulative behaviors on pretty much a daily basis. But to the outside world, the toxic person behaves in an exemplary manner. Everything looks okay on the outside world. A toxic individual behaves the way he or she does essentially for one main reason. He or she must be in complete control, must have all the power in his or her relationship. That's what a toxic person does. They want control of every aspect of the relationship. And while power struggles are normal in any relationship, toxic relationships are characterized by one person absolutely insisting on being in control. Now, there are a variety of toxic relationships, and so I want to examine a few of the common ones. These categories are not exclusive, but there's a few here that I think we can all begin to understand. These examples are seen in marriages. They're seen in other committed relationships, parent-child interactions, friendships, and all kinds of relationships. Here's what they are. The first one is the belittler. Somebody who is constantly belittling you. They will make fun of you, essentially implying that pretty much anything you say that expresses your idea, beliefs, or wants is silly or stupid. They belittle you. A toxic person will not hesitate to belittle you in public, in front of your friends, in front of your family. Maybe you say to the toxic person, "Stop, don't do that to me." And they'll say something like this, "Can't you just take a joke? I'm just joking." The problem is they're not kidding. And what they're doing is not a joke. The toxic partner like this wants all the decision-making power. And so if you tolerate this behavior long enough, you may be very well begin to believe you can't make good decisions on your own, and that you're belittled. This type of toxic individual will tell you that you're lucky to have them as a friend. You're lucky to have them as a partner, and that no other man or woman would really want you anyway. Aren't you lucky to have me? Look what you got. So his or her goal is to keep your self-esteem as low as possible, so you won't challenge their control. Then there's the bad temper. The bad temper. These individuals have unpredictable hair-trigger tempers. People around these kind of people describe themselves as walking on eggshells, never quite knowing what will send him or her into a rage. And so the constant need for vigilance and inability to know what will trigger an angry outburst wears both people down. It wears the victim, as you want to call them, somebody who's being the toxic against them. Emotionally and physically, they are exhausted because they don't know where to stop or where not to make the other person mad. This person is frequently seen as a pleasant, easygoing person whom almost everyone likes outwardly in public. But as you would expect, if you confront a bad-tempered person about the inappropriateness of their anger, they will almost always blame it on you. You caused me to do this. You caused me to lose my temper. You caused me to outburst. You caused. And sometimes it's your fault that they yell and scream. And sometimes it's your fault that they do this or the other. And so the disowning of responsibility for their dysfunctional behavior is a very typical thing of a toxic partner. You caused me to do this. Some outside source is causing this. It's not me, they think. And so that's the bad temper. Then there's the guilt inducer. The guilt inducer. You can kind of guess who this is. They control by encouraging you to feel guilty. Anytime you don't do anything he or she doesn't like. Not infrequently will they get someone else to convey their sense of disappointment or hurt to you. For example, your father calls you up to tell you how disappointed your mother was that you didn't come over for dinner. She gets somebody else to do it. A guilt inducer not only controls by inducing guilt, but also by temporarily removing guilt if you end up doing what he or she wants for you. They'll take the guilt away from you. For guilt-prone individuals, anything or anyone that removes guilt is very desirable and potentially almost addictive. So the guilt inducer has an extremely powerful means of control at their disposal. Guilt induction is a most common form used by a toxic parent to control their adult children. Frequently, a spouse or significant other will disguise their guilt-inducing control by seemingly supporting a decision you make. For example, maybe you're going to go back to school. And so they will support that, but they will induce guilt by subtly reminding you of how much the children are going to miss you when you're gone, or how much you haven't been paying attention to him or her lately, or those kind of things. But as with all toxic behaviors, guilt-inducing is designed to control your behavior so your toxic partner, your parent, your friend gets what he or she wants. Then there's the overreactor. The overreactor. If you've ever tried to tell a significant other that you're unhappy or hurt or angry about something, and they did, and they find out yourself, you're taking care of their unhappiness. What I mean by that is this. You find yourself comforting them instead of you getting comfort. They overreact. You feel bad about yourself for being so, quote, selfish that you brought up something that upset your partner so much. Your initial concern or hurt or irritation gets lost as you remorsefully take care of your partner's feelings. They overreact to something and you say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I didn't mean to say it that way. I didn't mean to react that way. And so they're wanting you to do that. They're causing you to do that. They're causing you to want to react that way. Then there's the number 5, the overdependent. This is an odd one, an overdependent. This is where someone is so passive that you have to make decisions for them. They're so passive that you have to make decisions for them. These toxic controllers want you to make virtually every decision for them, from where to go to dinner to what car to buy. And remember, not deciding is a decision that has advantages of making someone else, namely you, on the other side of the toxic, responsible for the outcome of that decision. Here's what I mean. You'll know when you've made the wrong decision because that toxic person's passive-aggressive behavior, they'll begin to pout. They let you make the decision, you make the decision, and they start pouting. Oh, I wanted to go to that restaurant. And so they begin to control you that way. Or they stop talking to you. Because you got to make the decision. You were making the decision and you chose a movie they didn't like. Or you choose to go spend the weekend with your parents somewhere and your partner goes along, but they don't speak to anybody for 2 days. Why? They didn't get to make that decision. Passivity can be an extremely powerful means of control. And so if you're involved in a relationship with a passive controller, you're likely to experience constant anxiety and fatigue as you worry about the effect of your decisions and what they have upon that partner. They're draining your entire life. Then there's the non-dependable. You ever met somebody like this? They frequently disguise their toxic, controlling behavior as simply asserting his or her independence. And they're saying this, I'm not going to let anybody control me. This toxic individual will only rarely keep his or her commitments. They're not dependable. But actually, here's what they're doing. They're controlling you by keeping you uncertain about what they're going to do. A non-dependable will say, I'll call you, and they don't call you. They say, oh, I'll take the kids out this Saturday, but they don't. Something always comes up for this kind of person. Something always that seems better. And they always have a plausible excuse, but they simply don't keep their commitments. And as a result, they control you by making it impossible for you to make commitments or plans. They're always controlling what you're doing. Oh, I want to do this on Saturday, and then Saturday comes and they say, no, I've got something else to do. It's not just their behavior that's unpredictable. You're never quite sure that they're really emotionally committed to you, and your relationship with them is not priority in life. And so you'll often find yourself asking for reassurance from them. Reassurance that you love me. Do you really love me? Do you really find me attractive? Are you committed to this? And so you're always looking for that. And so the response is just vague enough to keep you constantly guessing, and is designed to keep you doing what they want to do, is to earn their commitment. The anxiety you feel in a relationship eats away at your emotional health. Then there's the user. Number 7 is a user. Especially at the beginning of a relationship, a user seems to be very nice and courteous and pleasant. And they are, as long as they're getting anything and everything they want from you. They're in it to use you to get something else. Users are big-time energy drainers who will, in fact, leave you if they find someone else who will do more for them. If you can't satisfy them for what they want you to do, they'll go on. They'll move on. A really adept user will occasionally do something small for you, usually something small that doesn't inconvenience or cost them too much, but here's what we need to be warned about. They have not given you a gift, they've given you an obligation. Because if you ever balk at doing something for them or doing things their way, they'll immediately hold whatever they've done over your head and say, remember when I did that for you? Remember when I helped you? I don't know if you've seen the movie White Christmas, but Danny Kaye's character gets his shoulder hurt rescuing Bing Crosby's character when the war's going on. And so every time he wants something from Bing Crosby, he says, my shoulder, my arm. Remember my arm? And that's what it's like. Remember what I did for you? Remember how I helped you? And that's what a user is. The last one is the possessive. The possessive. They are the worst. They are really bad news. Early in your relationship with them, you may actually experience their or appreciate their jealousy. And most, but certainly not all possessives will imply that once the two of you are married or in a committed relationship, they'll be just fine. But don't believe it. This toxic individual will become more and more suspicious and controlling of you as time goes on. They'll check the odometer on your car to make sure you went exactly where you said you went. They'll check your phone to see who you're calling or what you did on it. They'll interrogate you if you have to stay late at work. In short, they'll make your life miserable trying to control you. Over time, they will work hard to eliminate any meaningful relationships you have with anybody else. It's just you and them. And they do not see themselves in a relationship with you. They see themselves as possessing you, as controlling you, as almost owning you. And so your efforts to reassure a toxic possessive about your fidelity and commitment to them will be in vain. If you stay in a relationship with such an individual, you will cease to really have a life of your own. So let's get to it as we close. Detox. What's detox? Well, oftentimes we hear about it in Hollywood stars or alcoholics, and they go in through a detox. They pay hundreds and thousands of dollars and get the alcohol or the drugs or whatever taken out of their body. Detox actually means cleanse. Cleanse. And I think sometimes we have to cleanse ourselves of certain types of people. First of all, you must identify and accept the reality of an out-of-balance relationship. You've got a relationship with a toxic person, you've got to really identify it and accept it. It's real. This is what's going on. At times you need to take stock of the situation and admit to yourself that the relationship just is not working. It's not going to be healthy. All your efforts at helping or rehabilitating the person have failed. You've done your best to try to help them, to try to show them. And it's at that point that you need to give that person over to God. Notice I didn't say that you give up on the person. To give up is to walk away and say, I don't care what happens to you. I don't care what happens to you, and you walk away. Now that happens a lot in marriages when divorce comes. I don't care what happens to you, and a few other words. And you walk away. That's not what I'm talking about. You're saying this, I've done all that I can do for you, and the only thing I can do is to trust you over to God, and trust you to God, and let Him help you. And when you give a person over to Almighty God, you're releasing that person from your own heart to one who can truly heal the person. You cannot heal that person, but Jesus Christ can. If you allow yourself to be drained and distracted by someone you truly can't help because that person doesn't truly want your help, they just want your association, they just want you for some other reason, then you'll not be in a position to help them. Secondly, don't try to be God to another person. Quit trying to play God to another person. There's a huge difference between helping a person and carrying a person. A lot of you may be carrying somebody around. That's what it feels like. You've got them on your back, on your shoulders, and you're carrying them around. And they're causing so much pain and problem. You can't do that. Don't enter into an enabling relationship in which you come to feel totally responsible for a person's success or failure. If you're dealing with this, let me give you the title of a book. One of the best books I've ever read. It's called Boundaries. Boundaries by Cloud and Townsend. It tells you and shows you how boundaries are important. Fences at your house. They're yellow. Two little yellow lines in the middle of the road. Boundaries. They're beneficial. And so that book helps understand how the boundary works between you and somebody who's causing this in your life. Third thing, trust God with courage. Just trust God with some courage. If you do have to end a relationship, not everybody's going to be happy with your decision. Did you realize that? For that matter, not everybody's going to be happy with your decision at any point regarding anything in your life. But there's always going to be somebody who wants you to be something other than what God's leading you to do. Nobody can please all people at all time, everywhere. Luke chapter 6, verse 26 says this, "Woe to you when all men speak well of you, for so did their fathers to the false prophets." Occasionally you need to recognize that hurting people sometimes hurt people. They're hurting. And they're lashing out at you. You need to be brave enough and God enough to say, this relationship isn't helping you or me. This relationship isn't healthy. We need to do something about this. We need to put an end to this. And so trust God to help you recognize when a relationship is becoming detrimental to your business, to your ministry, to your health, to your family. Trust God to give you the courage to end the relationship, and then trust Him to give you broad enough shoulders, thick enough skin to take the criticism that you're going to face. Fourthly, progressively end unhealthy relationships. Progressively end them. It takes emotional energy to end a relationship. If you cut every unhealthy relationship out of your life at one time, you're likely to be overwhelmed by your loss. Maybe you have multiple toxic people in your life. Progressively end them. Cut unhealthy relationships out of your life one at a time until you can look around and you say this, every relationship with a friend, that friend is helping me become more like Christ. That spouse is helping me to become more like Christ. That boyfriend, that girlfriend is helping me to become more like Christ. Mutual give and take. Mutual blessing. You shouldn't have to be going through all the pain and the problems that this friend, this toxic person is causing. Here's the last one. Move forward in victory. Just move forward. When you dissolve a relationship, don't do it in anger or bitterness. There's a way to walk away from a relationship without words of hatred or criticism or the placing of blame. And at the same time, walk away from an unhealthy relationship with the full intent that you will not revisit that relationship in the future. Walk away.